help. I'm not funny.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Croydon Communicators. Thank you for inviting me, but I'm also a member here, so welcome. And only I could agree to have given a workshop on humour 5 minutes after the Queen dies, but we'll try and make a good time of it. It was supposed to be an hour-long talk, but I've had to take out all my jokes about Prince Andrew, all my jokes about Meghan Markle, and a few jokes about Prince Philip. So we've got about 3 minutes left by the time I've taken all them out. So it'll be much quicker than you expected. But anyway, I thought maybe we could start with just a bit of a warm-up. And first of all, just a question where it can be a show of hands, and then we'll give you all a chance to hopefully say something. But how many of you have entered a humorous speech contest with Toastmasters before? Gula, Aminat? Yeah, a few. Okay. Pearl, yes. And how many of you are thinking about entering this year? Even less. Oh no. Okay. Well, 3 or 4. Hopefully by the end of this hour, I'll find enough content for an hour. Hopefully by the end there'll be a few more of you. But let's see. It's not just going to be about preparing for a contest. It's going to be about using humour when we speak in general. So hopefully it will add something for everyone. But I thought just as a bit of a warm up, just so it's not just me sat speaking for an hour, we could all just say a few words. If you want to, feel free to pass. But just to get an idea of what you find funny, I thought you could maybe tell me either a comedian that you like, a comedy TV show that you like, or maybe even a movie, a comedy movie that you like. So if we go around the room and you can just tell me one of those 3 things: comedian, TV show, movie. The only rule is you're not allowed to use the same category that the person before you did, so you might want to have 2 ready. Let's start with Asim. So you get to choose from the 3.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I'm going to pick someone who covers all 3: comedian, stand-up comedian, TV show, and films as well. And that's Ricky Gervais. I think he's just super talented and hilarious. And you should all follow him on Twitter. He's fantastic.
Thank you, Asim. Good one. Covers all 3. Which one would you say you wanted it to cover, though, so that the next person can't?
This is tough, really. But I'm going to go for probably his TV. He's done so many great shows. I'm going to go for that.
Thank you. Aminat.
Are we going by alphabetical order? Yeah. Well, my favorite person to listen to for humor right now is Miss Pat. She is a comedian, a podcaster, an actress now, and she has a podcast called The Pat Down. It is hilarious. Quite a lot of swearing, slightly vulgar, but you will laugh at the end of it. Back to you, Dan.
Lovely, thank you. No, it doesn't sound very Toastmastery with swearing and vulgarness. But anyway, Pearl.
Did you call me?
Yep.
Sorry. I love Trevor Noah. He is the host of the Daily Show. I love him because he's a fellow South African, and I love him because I understand his humor.
Thank you. Norma.
I was really hoping you wasn't going to say anything, ask me, because the only person I can think of is myself, because I like to laugh at myself. So
that's a good one. Thank you. Ian.
My favourite comedian at the minute is probably, or somebody that we listen to as a family, is probably Tom Allen. I like his quick wit. He's very quick-witted, and he's a family favourite. So yeah, Tom Allen.
Thank you, Ian. Yola.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, but we're not allowed to say comedian now. I'll just go for the TV show, Not Going Out. Do you know that one?
I know that one, yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, very good. Elisa.
I really enjoy watching Jimmy Fallon and all of the funny quips and quirks that he comes up with. It's very delightful.
Thank you. Joanna.
Hi, everyone. I am thinking of a classic, maybe Friends, the TV show. I think everyone knows that one.
Yep, think so. Good one. Nikita.
kind of a hard one for me because I enjoy so many, but one I think who is not so known in Britain is John Oliver, who's actually British, but is American TV.
Yeah, I watch his show. It's very good. Thank you. Amatar?
It's Amatari.
Hello.
Yeah. I think one of the TV programs I like watching is Supermarket Sweeps, the old episodes, because I find them hilarious when they run around trying to load the trolley with lots of different items and also look for the items they've told them to find.
Yeah. I'm not sure that was supposed to be funny, but it always was. Yeah. Ryan.
Hi everyone. I'm a big fan of American comedy, so things like The US Office or Parks and Rec. Steve Carell's definitely a favourite of mine.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I love The Office, one of my favourites. Cassandra. Cassandra, no. Daphne?
I haven't got a clue. Maybe that's why I'm not funny. There isn't someone who I listen to and say, oh, this person is really funny. But I like humor when I'm listening to movies or listening to people speak. But I can't think of any one person who I listen to. I tend not to do too much because, especially, I started on stand-up comedians and they swear too much and I can't sit down and laugh when I'm feeling offended.
Okay. Pankaj.
Hi. I like Indian TV show hosted by Kapil Sharma.
Hosted by?
Kapil Sharma. That's the Indian. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Richard?
Oh, hi. Although scripted, the American actor, Kevin Hart, I love his mannerisms. He's quite entertaining, but again, scripted.
Yeah, he's good. Rosa?
I was going to say Kevin Hart, so I'm going to go closer to home. I'm going to say my husband, but I'm usually laughing at him, not with him. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mohammed?
Hi. First day today. I've kind of had problem logging in. Just if you remind me of the topic, I'll just...
Yeah, we'll just say who our favourite comedian is, or a favourite.
Okay, a favourite. I probably go for the American guy who hosts the one show, the South African. I can't remember his name.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Trevor Noah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Trevor Noah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the one.
Thank you, Emmanuel.
You just stole my comedian.
Oh,
Trevor Noah as well.
Thank you. Lee?
Hello.
Hi, Lee.
Good evening.
We're just asking who people's favourite comedians or comedy TV shows are.
Oh, wow. I can't think of anything offhand, so I'll go with Norman Beaton, Desmond's.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I can't see anyone else with cameras on. Stella, are you there?
Cassandra is back.
Oh, Cassandra, go on then, Cassandra, and then we'll move on, I think.
I'm back, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me? Oh, perfect. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. It seems like it's freezing up today. The best comedian for me might be, I've got two, Ryan Reynolds and Eddie Murphy. I mean, he's an original. Yeah, anything from Prince Coming to America is probably one of his best comedies. But yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, well done, everyone. We're probably going to get a bit short on time, but thank you for all contributing there. That was excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about the value of using humour in a speech, and not just necessarily the value of using it for the audience themselves. Obviously, when we speak, we're trying to give value to the audience, but it can give so much value to us as speakers. And I'm always reminded, and some people will have heard this story several times before, but of the very first time I went to Toastmasters and I was terrified of speaking. I didn't go to speak. I avoided speaking at all costs. I wouldn't speak at work, anywhere. But I went to Toastmasters just to watch some speeches. I didn't even realize it was particularly a place that you could go and speak yourself. And I watched some speeches in the first part, and then I got asked if I'd like to do a table topic. And I had no idea what that meant. I said yes. I think I thought it was a chocolate bar. I don't know. But I remember I then found out what it was. And the break was still happening. And I went to the bathroom, to the toilets, and I started thinking, okay, my normal kind of approach. How do I get out of this now? Can I squeeze through the window? Turns out I couldn't, too small. And before I knew it, I was back inside the room. And for the first time in my life, I was up in front of a group of people, and I'd been asked this question, and I had 2 minutes to answer it. And I'm sure you've all been in that position. And we've got table topics coming up after this, so we won't talk so much about it now. But also I remember in that 2 minutes that I spoke, or probably minute that I spoke, I don't really remember what I was saying. I just remember that the people were laughing, and it didn't feel like they were laughing at me. It felt like whatever I was saying was making them laugh. And I don't really know what I was saying, but the confidence that gave me was just to carry on and be up there and think, okay, this isn't so bad. People are enjoying it. Why have I spent 30 years avoiding this? Because it's not so bad. And I genuinely think it was the laughter that helped that. And then some of you will know, some of you won't know that last month I got to the semi-finals of the World Championships for public speaking. And just 5 years after having had that experience in Toastmasters, where it was the first time I ever spoke, suddenly I was back in this position where I was going to go, and there were going to be several hundred people in the room, and there were going to be however many thousand people watching online all over the world. And for 4 weeks before, all I thought was, what if I go back to that point I was at 5 years ago, where I go on stage and I just can't open my mouth, and how horrible is that going to be? And I'm sure you've all had feelings like that at different times in different ways. So that day of the semi-final, I came out out onto stage, and my speech was called The Definition of Insanity. And the first thing I said was, are you insane? So I came out, I said, are you insane? And it wasn't really planned as a joke. It was the opening to my speech. I didn't really think that was particularly funny, but the whole room just started laughing. And immediately the nerves were gone. The way that humor can make us relax and the audience relax when we're on stage is just, there's nothing else as powerful. I don't think that there might be messages we can give that are very powerful, and very powerful stories we can tell where we connect with an audience. But something that works so well for both the speaker and the audience, I think it's humor every time. So I think it is very, very important. And I don't think you'll ever feel as confident on stage as when you've made an audience laugh. So really that's kind of something I want to stress at the start today. So what I want to do in the rest of this session is talk about how we can use humor, how we can bring out humor, but I kind of want to do that within the context of your own story. And people often say to me when I ask them if they're thinking of entering the humorous contest, or if they'd give a humorous speech, they always say, well, I'd like to, but I'm not funny. And that's kind of where the title of this workshop comes from. Because people, I mean, how many people here, show of hands, how many of you think you're funny? Nikita, you are very funny. I've seen your stand-up. Yeah, very good. And Norma. But yeah, most of us don't think we're naturally funny, and we certainly don't think that we can go up in a humorous contest and give a speech that's going to make people laugh. But what I do in this position, and if any of you are thinking of giving a humorous speech or competing in the contest, is just think of something funny that's happened to you. So could you just do that for a few seconds now? Pretend that you're with a friend, you're out for coffee, and you've just got to tell them one funny story from your life. So I'm not going to ask you that just now. We'll try and build out on it a bit more later, but at least just have something in your mind of what that story might be. And I think one thing you'll notice as you think about that story is that you're not necessarily being funny in the story. It's maybe just a funny event, a funny occasion. My most recent example of this, and it's slightly non-Toastmastery, so cover your ears if you don't like the kind of stuff that someone mentioned was Amanat around the room. But last week I was away. I'd been in Nashville at the contest, and then I went to California. I was having some time there, and I was in my room late one night, and it was kind of an apartment complex. And there was a knock on the door, and it was midnight. And I thought, that's a bit strange. And I looked over my shoulder, and I could see behind me someone at my door. And it was a very young boy, really. He was maybe 21. And he had a towel wrapped around him. And the swimming pool was behind. So I thought, oh, maybe he's got caught. You know, he's left his key. He can't get into his room or something. And you know, someone stood half naked in a towel at that time, and I didn't look the most threatening. So I opened the door, and he said, "Hi, well, would you like me to come in and we could have some fun?" Yeah. So I wasn't really at this point. I don't think I'd still really processed what he'd suggested. And so I still hadn't said anything. I think I was just open-mouthed. And then he said, tell me what kind of things do you like to do? And then I think there was a little bit of an audible squeak came out of my mouth at that point, maybe a shriek, I don't know. There was something. And then he suddenly just said, oh, you're not gay. And I kind of shook my head, and he said, oh, I'm terribly sorry. My name's Chris. And he gave me a fist bump, and off he went. And that was it. Now, I can see a few of you found that story amusing. I didn't do anything funny in it. I was sat on my sofa, I answered the door, and I was in shock. That was all I did in that story. So we don't need to be funny to tell funny stories, to tell people about things that happen to us. We just need to have funny stories, and we've all got them. So have a think about one of them, and we are going to come back to it later. As I say, I'm not going to ask you now, but have something in mind as we go through this. And think of a funny story like the one I've just told that you could tell us. Okay, now before we get to that, we'll go off into breakout rooms, and we'll just spend a few minutes discussing those ideas. But before we get to that, let's look at some structure that we can use, which I didn't really use then in that story, but some structure that we can use to turn our stories into speeches, because a funny story isn't a speech, and that's another issue I think some people have. How do I turn that funny little anecdote I've got into a speech? So let's just go through a few things. You might want to make some notes on this for when we go to the breakouts in a few minutes. But there are 5, I think, main areas that I think about when I want to write a humorous speech. I mean, before I get to these 5 areas, I've done what you've done. I've got that funny idea, that funny story, amusing story in my head. And then I'll ask myself these questions. The first one is, who am I in the speech? So think about your story. Who are you in that speech? Are you the loser? Are you the winner, the victim, the innocent person who's answered the door and found Chris standing outside? Who are you in that speech? I'm also, if we get time, I'm going to play the speech that I gave at the district finals this year. And in that speech, I was just a member of Toastmasters who was having a bit of a disaster with an evaluation. But I think it's important to know who you are, because once you know who you are, if you're the victim, if you're the loser, then stay the victim, the loser throughout the speech. Don't suddenly, it can stop you going on tangents where suddenly you're all laughing at somebody else, and it's not about you anymore. I think it's important to have that constraint on the speech, that you know who you are and you stick to that. And if you think of some of the comedy shows we were mentioning, someone mentioned Mr. Bean, and yes, we know who Mr. Bean is the entire time. He's not suddenly going to change on us. Ricky Gervais's shows, he's not suddenly going to change his character. We know that in some shows like The Office, he's probably the loser. In other shows like Extras, he's more kind of the person who stands back and watches all this nonsense going on around him. But we don't get a mixture of those two things across the 2 shows. So know who you are in your speech. Then what's happening in the speech? And I think there are 2 answers to this question. There's what's actually happening. There's what your story is. So my story just then about Chris is that I was answering the door. He was there. So what's happening in your speech? And that's up to you. I mean, it could be a completely true story. It could be one you make up, but think about what's happening. The second level of what's happening kind of has to be there no matter what to create comedy, and it has to be conflict. You've always got to have some conflict in the speech, and sometimes there'll be conflict without you realizing it. I think You don't have to think too much about the story. I just told to realize that what the conflict was, various levels of conflict of, should I answer the door at this time of night? What do I say? What is he saying? You look at comedy shows and again, Mr. Bean, the conflict between him and all the different trouble he's getting into along a show. So you need some conflict in a speech, in your story, to make it funny, to make the audience connect and laugh, because they picture themselves in that position and with that conflict and start to think about what they might do. So really, it's probably naturally going to be there. I think if you've got a funny story, there will be some natural conflict, but be aware of it, especially if you're making a story up that you want something that really brings that out. And then, where are you in your speech? Because I think it's important for the audience to be able to understand and picture the setting of this speech as it unfolds. And that doesn't mean going into a very great kind of, almost as if you're writing a novel description of where you are, but just letting the audience know where you are, what's you've told them what's happening, they know who you are, and they know where you are, and then they create this picture in their heads, and you're not bouncing around all over the place from one scene to the other. Just helps the audience to follow it. So think about where you are during the speech. And again, if you think about a sitcom, it'll generally be in maybe 2 or 3 locations. There'll be the house, there'll be the pub, and it'll be those same locations every week. And it helps ground us and helps us follow that story and buy into the humor. So really think about that. So who, what, and where. Just note those things down and think about how they can relate to your story that you might tell us. Next up is the message of your speech. And if you go and do stand-up comedy in a club, if anyone's ever done that, I know 1 or 2 of us have, then you don't really need a message. You go and tell a joke, you've got punchlines, people laugh, people go home happy, that's it. If you're giving a humorous speech, there should always be something for the audience to take away. It might be a throwaway message, something that's just kind of entertaining, but you'll want something in there. And I think the 2 speeches that I've done at district level with humour have both had strong messages in them, even though they've been very silly stories, really. In 2019, I gave a speech about how I was trying to poison the previous year's winner, just so that I would have a better chance of winning the contest. And there was lots of humour in that, in terms of what I was doing and the lengths I would go to try and sabotage him. But you might think, well, no obvious message. It's just a silly speech about you trying to poison someone else. And that's how it started out. But then I was aware that I really need something for the audience to kind of take away as well, a reason to be giving this speech and a better chance of winning the contest. And it kind of, as I worked with it, it became fairly obvious that the message was, yes, we're never, I hope, most of us, gonna try and poison another contestant or sabotage them just so that they don't win. But we do that to ourselves all the time. We constantly poison ourselves against ourselves and sabotage ourselves so that we can't win competitions, or we can't give successful speeches, or we can't do whatever it is we tell ourselves we can't do. And so I think no matter how silly sometimes the story you're telling is, there'll always be a message there. The Chris story, maybe the message would be, don't answer the door late at night. Maybe the message would be, definitely do answer the door late at night. I don't know. I haven't figured that one out yet. But have a think about what the message will be in your story, and you can bend the story so it fits with almost anything, any message you want to give, really. But have a think about what that message that you want to give is, and how your story could help you give that. And the final element to consider for now, I think, is the introduction and conclusion to this story. I think this is what helps turn a short anecdote into a speech, along with the message. So you've got your story, or your body of your speech, which is the anecdote. But then you'll want an introduction and a conclusion that kind of do slightly different things, that maybe just engage the audience a little bit, maybe get them thinking about where you're going to go, get them laughing early on. And it'll be something that sits a little bit separately to your story, links to your story, but it's just something a little bit separate. And the same with the conclusion. You might tell your funny anecdote, you might give your message, but you'll want something funny at the end again. If it's a humorous speech, especially if it's a contest speech, you'll want to finish with the audience laughing, and you'll want to bring them in again and you know, do what you can to interact with them. I remember 2 years ago, I think it was, we had a lady from India who won the humorous speech contest in our district shift Priya. And her speech was about trying to find love in India, and the conflict was there with her parents and rules, and the fact that she was given this speech in our culture, and we have different ways of doing things. So there was plenty of conflict in there, and there was a story about people that she'd met. But there was a very clear kind of standalone introduction and conclusion to that speech, where when she started, she had her phone and she was just swiping left and right on Tinder, I think was the app, saying left, right, and then kind of looked at us and said, oh, there you are, and went into her speech. But just as an introduction to kind of get us, we knew what she was doing. We knew straight away, kind of, there was humor straight away, but it wasn't that she'd gone straight into her story. She'd given us something as an audience to interact with her. And then at the end of the speech, she suddenly said, I think there was a beep that she had ready, and she said, oh, I've got a match. Does anybody know? And then I think that day it was a seam, was it? Maybe it was a seam that had tried to match with her. But it just gave that link, that bond to the audience right at the end. It finished off with a big laugh. We were all laughing at someone with the audience, not in a cruel way. I mean, if what a seam chooses to do in his spare time is perfectly okay. But it was a nice way to top and tail that speech with the story in the middle. So the introduction and conclusion in a humorous speech is very, very important. So think about that in your own story. Okay, so to sum up, and then what we'll do is, where are we doing for time? Yeah, not too bad. So I'll sum up this, then I'll play the speech that I did at district this year. We could watch that and maybe just talk about some of the things that we've covered here, some of these elements, and hopefully some of you will notice some of the things and make some comments on them. So let's do that for now. So the things to look out for are, who am I in the speech? What was happening? Where was it happening? What was the conflict? What was the message? And the introduction and conclusion. So maybe just think about one or two of those things as you watch, and we'll talk about them at the end. Okay, let me play this. Oh, could I screen share, please, the scene? Thank you. Are you seeing the big face of the contest chair?
We are, yes.
Yes, good. Okay, there we
go. Mr. Timekeeper. And now we welcome our 7th contestant to the stage. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you can see and hear me?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
And I confirm that I can see and hear you. And have you hidden the non-video participants? Thank you.
Hidden them, yes, yeah.
And can you see the timekeeper?
Yes.
Please feel free to pin the timekeeper. And are you ready to speak?
Oh, good. Thank you.
Wonderful. So please welcome Dan Magill with a speech entitled Wonderful World. With a speech entitled Wonderful World, please welcome Dan Magill.
Thank you. Quick show of hands. How many of you can't wait to get back to in-person conferences or in-person meetings? Me too. For example, if we were in person right now, I might have an idea how many of you just put your hands up. I've got a friend who joined Toastmasters during the pandemic, and this wonderful world of online meetings is all she knows. And she's completely addicted to online. Anything she sees on a screen, she evaluates. So I was with her last week and a clip of the moon landings came on TV. She said, well, I've got some recommendations. I said, what? Recommendations for Neil Armstrong 53 years later? She said, well, if he was to give that landing again.
I'd tell him to work on his eye contact, and maybe he could use more of the moon. Contest chair, fellow Toastmasters, and my insane friend who is here today. Of course she is. During the pandemic, I started visiting clubs all over the world. One day, I emailed a club in Canada and asked if I could make a virtual visit. Oh, of course, Dan. We need an evaluator if you're up for it. Online evaluation, not a problem. An hour or so later, I got an email from the speaker I'd be evaluating with some information about her speech. I skimmed over it, as we do. Her name was Jessie. The title was Wonderful World. It was an icebreaker, and she'd be talking about her love for Neil Armstrong. Perfect. I thought of a clever conclusion, closed my laptop, job done. That night at 1 a.m., I logged in, ready for the meeting. The Toastmaster of the day was there, suited up, hair gelled back, handheld microphone. Definitely thought that he'd just been given his own chat show. I know, we've got a few of them. Can we have a big round of applause for our first speaker on the show this evening, Jessie? Stay focused, I said to myself. It's late. Stay focused. Wow, what a great speech, Jessie. We'll be back with an evaluation of that speech right after these short messages. Only joking. It's like a TV chat show, isn't it? Let's head straight over to our special guest evaluator, Dan Magill, right now, all the way from London. What? She's finished? I hadn't heard a word of the speech. And there I was, pinned in my pajamas. Okay, keep calm, I said to myself. What would our leader, Boris Johnson, do in this situation? No, that wasn't going to work. But then it came to me. Dan, it looks like you're on mute. I wasn't, but I carried on. Dan, you don't seem to be on mute, but we can't hear a word here in the studio. What a plan. Blame technical issues, then disappear off the face of the earth. Except right then, my cat decided to jump in front of the camera. Meow. Oh, Dan, we can hear the cat. We can hear the cat. Take two. What a speech Jessie gave us today. That brings me to my first recommendation. I thought she could have used more of her screen. In the corner of my eye, I noticed somebody type in the chat. Does he realize Jessie is a man? Okay, that was it. I needed to get out of this. I remembered it was an icebreaker. I remembered it was about Neil Armstrong. My big conclusion still worked. So to conclude, this may have been one small step into his living room tonight. But to paraphrase his greatest hero, it was one giant leap for Jessie's confidence. Next morning, I got an email from Jessie thanking me for the evaluation. I loved your conclusion. But you do realize my speech was about my hero, Louis Armstrong, not Neil Armstrong. Ah, Wonderful World. Well, that made more sense. It wasn't my best moment. But you know, back then, everybody on this planet was scared. We'd been hit by a deadly pandemic, and none of us knew where we were headed. We needed to be together. We needed to laugh. And as Toastmasters, that's what we did. Yes, of course, Most of us are looking forward to doing things like this in person again. Me too. But we should never forget the times we've enjoyed here, the people we've met, and the wonderful work we've all done over these last couple of years. As Toastmasters, we've brought light to people's darkness. We brought laughter to people's loneliness. And we brought some truly awful virtual backgrounds into people's homes. So in the heavily, heavily edited words of Louis Armstrong, Louis, the colours of your living rooms, so pretty on the screen, the books on your shelves that you never even read. I've seen friends shaking hands, red timing lights too. They're really saying, yeah, we've had just about enough of you. I've heard babies cry. I've watched your beards grow. But it was better than the Tiger King or any other Netflix show. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Contest chair. Okay, thank you. Right. So we're going to go off into breakout rooms in just a couple of minutes and talk about our own ideas that we've got. But is there any comments that might just help just to talk about that speech? Maybe with the elements that I spoke about, the who, what, where, conflict, messaging, introduction, conclusion. Anybody like to raise their hand and talk about it? Oh. Well, in that case, we should just go, oh, okay, go on then, Amanat.
I can't unmute myself to help me. I know it was quite clear where you were and who you were. You were quite descriptive in getting the audience to see and feel and spatially recognize the environment you were occupying in that space, and in between that's helped us that's helped make the story quite connective to the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think in terms of the message as well, I first gave this speech a while ago actually, and when I first gave it, and it was very heavily based on a true story. But when I first gave it, the message was about how we should, we come to Toastmasters to learn to speak and be better leaders, but really it's about listening properly. And so you could give that, you could tell that same story, and the message could be about listening. And I think that it's just an example of how our stories are there, and we've got them, and we can mold them and play with them to take us in any direction we want, really. So really think about that with your own stories. And if you're giving a speech in a contest, it is really important. There's a big mark for how valuable your speech is, and the value comes from kind of that message, that takeaway that you give to the audience, even if it's not some big serious kind of go and change your life message, just that there's some value there for the audience to take away. So when you're thinking about a humorous speech, it's not just thinking how can I make the audience laugh, it's also what can I give them to take away. So think about that as well. Anyway, anyone else got anything else? Otherwise, we'll go off and discuss our own ideas. No? Okay. So what have we got? About 30 people, is it? So maybe 5 in each group. And if you could just, it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of you all discuss your own idea, but maybe 1 or 2 of you will be brave enough to tell the others what your idea is, and you could discuss it together, and then just pick one of them. We'll go away for about 10 minutes. Pick one of them and then come back, and one person from the group, hopefully the person whose idea it was, can just talk to us about that idea and what went on in the group. So if that's okay, Asim, don't put me in a group, but everyone else, 5 or so people into one, and off you go. See you in a bit.
Okay, the rooms are open.
Hello, welcome back everyone. Well, I think maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 rooms were a bit confused. Hopefully not all of you, and well, so what if you were? It's humor, it's all humor. But let's quickly go through each group. I don't suppose that the groups were numbered, were they, it seems? So maybe just
They were.
They were.
Yeah, they were.
All the rooms had numbers.
Oh, great. Okay, then. So let's start with group 1. And is somebody willing to tell us what they discussed? What maybe what specific story they discussed? What happened? Group 1.
I think we were group 1.
Go for it.
Well, I can't really say because it was Milhana's story that just cracked me up. I was just going to point to her, but I'm more than happy she's not here to say her story. But her story was so hilarious that I thought it needed to be shared here.
Yeah, she's here. Come on, Milhana.
And I can't actually believe she's in Sri Lanka at this particular time. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I feel special now. So it's like this. During the pandemic, so we were all feeling so miserable, so useless. And I was feeling so fat and ugly. So I wanted to join this gym. So since we could not travel, there was this Zoom gym for ladies. So what I did was I paid a thumping amount and I joined with the intention of losing a few kilos. And I ended up just laughing at those who were working out in the gym. Now, the greatest thing about Zoom is that you can just switch off your cameras and do whatever you want. Now, my trainer was under the impression that I was working out, and she would say, Milhana, yes, you got this, you can do this. How many squats did you do? Whereas I am munching onto some French fries, or I'm drinking a milkshake, and I'm just literally laughing at all the ladies who are jumping up and down. I know it is mean, but at times when you feel miserable, just think it's okay. You can just look at somebody and just laugh and just, feel happy about it. Life is sometimes a joke. You just need to laugh. Over to you.
Thank you, Milhana. And so that you don't all feel pressure on the back of that, Milhana is actually the district champion in her country, Sri Lanka, for humorous speech. So well done. That wasn't the speech that she gave. I have seen it. It was a very different story. But yes, you don't have to live up to that standard of funny story. That was excellent. Group 2, anybody there? Whose people are pointing? I can't. Oh, I'm not on mute too.
We had Goulet, Ian, Lee, Nikita, and Richard.
Ian.
Okay, yeah, that was us.
Yes,
so,
we have Ian.
So I sort of gave my story. So I'll just give you the story as I've told the others. So my unfortunate story started with me on my daily commute and cycling into Croydon, as I did every day. On my way in, some lady doing her commute to her, wherever she worked, was on her way, but she was driving and she hit me. So, and I got hit off my bike and I was knocked unconscious for a while. But luckily, I woke up about 30 seconds later and I was sore and the adrenaline kicked in and I was sort of feeling, obviously out of sorts. And luckily there was a doctor with me just passing by at the time. But yeah, I mean, I was sort of working out what was going on. I was pretty cross by that point and feeling a bit angry. But and the doctor suggested that, we need to keep this guy warm. So the lady whose car who hit me, she said, well, I've got the perfect thing. So she sort of went off to a car. And as she walked back, she started unfolding this giant pink Barbie blanket with life-size Barbie heads all over it. So I was sort of thinking that, my day can't get any worse than this. So, and she sort of put it over me. She was trying to help, but she started putting it over me. She started tucking me in, so nice to make sure I was all nice and warm. And I was thinking again, my day just can't get any worse than this. And I was feeling really cross by this point. And bearing in mind, it was rush hour. And then just at that point, the tram sort of slowly came down and stopped about 10 feet away from where I was sitting. And I was looking at the tram and all I could see was this wall of people climbing over themselves. Some people had phones and they were taking photos. And I was thinking, this is a really, really bad day. So after I'd been to hospital and I'd sort of, you know, worked out that I just got a fractured wrist, bit of a sore head and some bruises, I suddenly thought, well, lots of people have actually been taking photos and videos of me. So I thought, maybe I'm famous. Maybe I'm on the internet somewhere. So I thought, well, I better find out. So I started Googling blanket Barbie boy, and all these different things started flooding into my head to find out whether I finally made it onto the internet. So that's my story.
Thank you, and your message there was a great story. What can we
so yeah, the message is be careful what you sort of wish for, and just when you think you can't get any worse, well, actually it can.
Okay, good, thank you. Three, who was in group 3?
We had Alyssa, Daphne, Norma, Pankaj, and Ryan.
Oh, Daphne's just put a camera on. She looks keen.
I somehow got voluntold to do this, and I am so not funny. So I had to make up something. Now, I was about 14 or 15, and my mom asked me to go down to the market to fetch something after school. So, school finished, in my school uniform, I walked down to the market. And the market is this place where lots of people are, shops, there's a bar with people, men usually sitting around the bar, and the supermarket just a little further up the road. I went to the market, didn't find what my mother sent me for, came out and was walking home. The next thing I know, I was flat on the ground on my face. And you know, you fall in the middle of town, everybody looking, or you think everybody is looking. I quickly looked around, didn't see anybody, and jumped up and thought, okay, I got away, nobody saw me. And then as I was walking up the road, a guy on the corner smiled at me and started clapping. And I thought, oh my God, he saw me. So what did I do? I simply stood and bowed and said, thank you, thank you. And the message is, it is not what happens to you, but how you deal with it that matters.
Excellent, thank you. I was sure when you were on the ground there was going to be a Barbie blanket pop up there, but well done, excellent. Group 4. Anybody assume? Do you know who was there? Who can we call?
Joanna.
Ah, okay. Come on then, Joanna.
I started by telling the story that I had prepared. However, we had the quintessential Zoom meeting issue. We had a person in the room that didn't know that she was not on mute and she was on a phone call. I cannot tell you how much Pearl, Stella, and I struggled to hear. I don't know who, myself, the person, I don't know. But at some point we just stayed quiet. Haven't you just stood quiet to listen the other conversation just next to you? Well, we cannot avoid it, can't you? I tell you, I didn't understand a thing. Stella could understand everything. Stella, do you want to come in and tell us what the conversation was about? It was a fan, right?
Well, she was obviously in Jamaica and she had a very strong Jamaican accent. And well, she talked about the Queen, and then she was talking about the price of a whacker, which is one of those long-handled grass cutters. And then she talked about a fan, one of those ones with a long stand, you know, those mobile ones that you just plug in. So she was talking about lots of different things. And there were times when there were some expletives as well, which I won't repeat. But it was a very funny conversation. It was a shame that we actually had to leave because we wanted to hear more as to what else she was going to say. So we didn't do anything. We just listened into this phone call.
Adrian had better be careful because we'll be doing the same thing to him right there.
So
Adrian,
our message would be to pay attention, to listen carefully, because you need to listen to other people's conversation. Back to you then.
Mute yourself, Adrian.
Sorry, Joanna and Stella, you were on mute. Can you say that again? No, you weren't. You weren't on mute. Thank you. Yeah, good one. Good message. Is the person still in here? I can only apologise for these two. If you are, I'm sorry. They shouldn't be reporting back on a private conversation. Okay, the next group. 5 or 6. I don't know where we are now.
Room 5, I think. Emmanuel, Gina, Rupa, Zelma, and Jill, I think. Gil.
Come on, there's plenty of people there. Emmanuel.
Rupa.
So Rupert shared a story with us, which she wasn't going to talk about. She shared a story with us, and we just listened to Rupert's story, and then we chipped in terms of how she could develop the story and inject some humour. And it was about arriving to the UK, arriving at Heathrow Airport without very little money, and approaching a gentleman that looked quite wealthy and asking how she could get from Heathrow Airport to Crawley. And we just listened to the story and then gave some advice, how she could embellish the story to make the story humorous. So paint a picture with her words. I spoke about perhaps she could describe the challenge of getting a taxi, approaching cars, and then people approaching her, rushing past her, getting into the taxi, people approaching her, shouting at her, screaming at her, and she didn't quite understand why people were reacting in an aggressive manner to her. All she was trying to do was to get in a taxi without knowing the rules of having to queue up at a taxi queue. So it was really good that Rupa shared her story with us, which she didn't think was humorous, and that we saw the possibility of embellishing the story to inject some humour or surprise. And what message? The message could be around the cultural norms, the cultural differences, one about communication. I don't know if anyone else who was in my group wants to contribute to what I've just summarised and fed back.
Great.
Yes.
Oh, go on. Who's that?
It's Emmanuel. I think that the thing about Rupa's story was she felt it wasn't funny at all. And we thought that the fun would be in how she tells the story. And that's where we're trying to help her develop it. In the beginning, when you come into a big airport like Heathrow, you're new to it, it's your first time there. You have to put yourself in a position, sort of prepare yourself to go speak to this new person. And it's never easy when you're approaching a new face the first time. You have to compose yourself, maybe put your hair in the right places, check yourself, and then approach this person. And then after you've got the information you've got from them, depending on how this information lands with you, if it's different from your culture, the culture you're used to, there should be an element of surprise, and these elements should all be communicated to the other person. And then the takeaway for me from her story was, just because you appear wealthy doesn't mean the other person is not wealthy. What is wealth anyway? Yours could be cash wealth, mine could be knowledge wealth, things like that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel and Gina. Great job. I think just in terms of that, just quickly, we've basically got less than no time left, but just quickly on that, thinking you're not funny and thinking something isn't funny, with the speech that I did in the semi-final in Nashville last month, I practiced it every day for a month here in the UK before I went over there at different clubs. And I had lots of jokes in there, and I was delivering the speech to 10 or 12 people every night at different clubs around London and the UK, and nobody was laughing ever. I wasn't getting any laughs from these jokes. And just from previous experience of having spoken at conferences in front of big groups, I kind of knew that when it was a huge group of 500 people and they were all drunk and all enjoying their weekend at a conference, that they would laugh. And when I got there and I gave the jokes there, they did. It got more laughter than it got laughter in some of the wrong places. They were so drunk. But sometimes you kind of have to go through that, and it just because an audience doesn't laugh, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not funny. Just the situation that night might not quite work. So if you go for it, and don't worry about the results so much. And you can always tweak things and tinker with them, but don't let trying something funny and people not laughing be the be all and end all, because it definitely isn't. Okay, just quickly before we finish, and there was one more group, was there? Or not?
That was it. Yeah, the other group was, yeah.
Okay. Well, I did have a whole section on online humor, and because most of these contests are going to be online, but we'll have to come back and do that the other time. Just to say, when you're online, try and involve the audience as much as you can. Reach through the camera and speak directly to them. Be yourself, be authentic, and be funny. We haven't got time for questions right now. If Elisa's up for it, maybe we could do them together after her session, but I won't delay any longer, and we'll have the break. Thank you, everyone.